You know, in past campaigns, we've always seen the Republicans eventually flock around the presumed leader. That's why we've been paying so much attention to Mitt Romney, who completely dropped off the face of the earth in the discussion yesterday. But one of the things that we're seeing this time is the debate is between, at least for now, until Mitt Romney finds a way to elbow his way back in, between Governor Perry. Governor Perry.
They're all interchangeable like Legos.
Yeah. Congresswoman Bachmann. But the reason is because they're fighting for just their base. And that's what the Democrats and Debbie Wasserman Schultz are hoping they'll do. Fight for the Tea Party while they're trying to still go to the middle. And we don't know whether either one of them is capable or even wants to, at this stage, begin to do that.
The Boston Herald and says that, Rick Perry is Mitt Romney's worst nightmare. Is there some truth to that?
There is some truth to that. I mean, Governor Perry comes from a very big and important state. He's been the governor of that state for a decade, longer than anybody in the history of Texas. He has a record he can talk about on job creation. The question about Rick Perry that is unanswerable at this point is what kind of a candidate he'll be on the national stage. He's been a very effective candidate in Texas, but we don't know when somebody steps out of that comfort zone that he's so familiar with and onto something that is totally different, how he's going to perform.
Well, we're going to see how he's going to perform, right, John? Because we've got 3 debates in September for the Republican candidates.
That's right. He got 3 debates, and the expectations are very high. We've never really had a Superman candidate swoop in and take over the field. History is really littered with candidates who came in and weren't what was expected. So he'll have to perform in those 3 debates. He'll have to just perform in the small rooms of Iowa and New Hampshire, much different stage than in Texas. And he's going to have lots of investigative reporters going down to Texas. He'll have to be fighting off those stories about his terms in office while he's trying to actually mount a campaign. That's a tough juggling act.
Here's the huge advantage for Governor Perry. I was talking to a lot of voters yesterday at the Iowa straw poll, and of course they are your most committed, most engaged. But even the ones who are voting for also-rans, at least for the purposes of the straw poll, like Rick Santorum, and people who were speaking only specifically about social conservative issues, they were saying, you know, I like my guy, but I really want somebody to beat President Obama. And they are so animated to oust President Obama that he may be able to make the case that I'm best able to do that, no matter how exciting the other people say.
I ran into that sentiment in the Bachmann tent.
Yes.
A couple there who said, you know, if Perry was here, we might be in his tent.
So you think that some of the Bachmann people could actually be interested in Governor Perry?
If he performs, and that's Dan's point, which is that he's got a lot of hurdles to jump over, and he's got to show that he can do this balancing act, talk to the Tea Party, but also show that he's a viable general election candidate.
I think Governor Romney is going to try to make the case that he has a greater ability to reach to the key voters in a general election, that he can do better in the Midwest, for example, or these upper Midwest states than Rick Perry. Rick Perry has been terrific at appealing to a conservative base in Texas, but he hasn't had to deal with independents down there.
And President Obama is beginning his first bus tour of his presidency here in the Midwest, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois. He will be here in Iowa at the same time as Governor Rick Perry. We're going to have sort of a debate of sorts on Monday, different visions on the economy by President Obama and Governor Rick Perry.
We go back to the Reagan example from 1983 and 84. He had high unemployment and he had low approval ratings. But he had growth numbers at this point in 1983 that were so far above what anybody expects coming out. He was in the 8 and 9% growth in the economy at that point. That gave a sense of a lift. President Obama doesn't have that to look forward to, and so he's going to have a very difficult time.
So how does he get out of it? Prayer. And also,
he'll be calling Governor Perry for that.
And he hopes that Governor Perry perhaps is the nominee, and he can run against this idea that, oh, another Texan, and also the president will then be able to run against another candidate, spend all those millions he's raising against one person rather than having to defend his record all the time. He hopes, of course, to change that conversation.
We've created 2.4 million private sector jobs, 17 straight months of private sector job growth. So we have begun to turn things around. We acknowledge that we have a long way to go, and we are certainly no longer in free fall. We've just got to keep our nose to the grindstone and keep focused.
But how do you draw a contrast then against the governor of Texas, when nearly half of the jobs that have been created in America were created in Texas?
There are dramatic contrasts with the governor of Texas, not the least of which is that it's extremely difficult for him to deserve credit for that job creation when you have rising gas prices that created oil jobs that he had nothing to do with, when you had military spending as a result of 2 wars that created military jobs that he had nothing to do with, when you have the Recovery Act championed by President Obama that created jobs in Texas that he had nothing to do with. So it is way overblown to suggest that the job creation in Texas is squarely on the shoulders of his policies.
Big picture, what does this all mean?
Well, I think 2 huge things happened yesterday. At 1 o'clock, Rick Perry getting in, even though he wasn't there, was like he picked this whole building up and dropped it 20 feet. Changed everything, especially for Mitt Romney. Because now Romney can see a path in Iowa. Last time, Romney plus McCain plus Fred Thompson got more than half the caucus vote. So it's going to be a real tough call for Romney now. Does he get in here? Because he's got to stop Perry somewhere. If Perry comes out of here strong, and a lot of ifs, we don't know how he'll perform. But if he hits his speed, Mitt might be able to beat him in New Hampshire, but he's got South Carolina and Florida going. So all the strategies have changed. And 3 weeks from now in Iowa, if you like Michelle Bachmann, you're going to love Rick Perry. Because now there's another cheeseburger on the menu with some Texas hot sauce. It's a governor, and he's got the best first sentence in American politics, which is, I created 1/3 of the jobs in America in the last 2 years. His problem is the second sentence is they're all at Burger King or the government created them, which could be a headache in the general election, where I think he's a weak candidate. But in the primary, you look at Texas, what he did to Kay Bailey Hutchinson, 20 points down. This guy is a barracuda. He's going to eat her for lunch.
On Rick Perry, we spoke to Bob Schuman, who's running his super PAC, aligned with Perry, and I caught up with him yesterday on the grounds here and asked him about what would make him so formidable. This is what he said.
He's America's senior governor. I think he is the kind of guy that can appeal to social conservatives, fiscal conservatives. He got 39% of the Hispanic vote in Texas last time around. I think his broad appeal there, entrepreneurs, businessmen, blue-collar workers. I think he's a different kind of Republican, has a much broader appeal than some of the guys we've nominated recently.
That's what they said about the last Texas governor who became president, a different kind of Republican. Does it hold here?
And therein lies Perry's challenge. He has a great first sentence, as Mike says, best job creator in the country. The broader problem, though, is this. Can he get to that message? Can voters in suburban Philadelphia, suburban Columbus, Milwaukee, can they even hear the jobs message, David, because they're so struck by the culture, by the Texas persona? I think he's going to have to really focus on trying to sort of dial back some of that West Texas swagger, some of that Texas A&M persona, because he's never going to get to his jobs message if the suburbanites can't get past the cowboy boots. Is this your father's GOP? If it is, then Weaver is right. And the GOP will nominate whoever is next in line that appears to be Romney. But here's why I think Perry could be that bracket buster, because he can appeal to sort of both wings. He can do the establishment side, governor of one of the biggest states in the country for 10 years, but also he was Tea Party before it was cool. So I think Perry has the possibility, and we'll see, it's still early yet, to appeal to sort of both of those wings. And he, I think, could be very formidable because of that.
But see, Perry's interesting because I believe in that silo rule too, but Perry is a silo jumper, which means he can perform here, and he might be able to, like Huckabee, they're rare, might be able to run the table. And that's a problem, because I don't know a senior, experienced, real consultant in the party who's actually done races who doesn't think that Perry is a super serious candidate for the nomination and a weak candidate in the general election.
All right, we asked on Facebook what the impact would be of Governor Perry of Texas getting in the race, and we got some interesting responses. Kevin C. writes this: there's going to be a lot of noise associated with him, but he's too big of a target for the Democrats. Jonathan, why?
I talked to some top Democrats last night. They were thrilled, David, at the votes that Perry got here. They're excited because of the culture factor, because of the fact that he looks the part of that swaggering Texan, and they think that could help divert from, obviously, the economic challenges the president has. If they can make this less of a referendum, more of a choice, make it more about the opponent's views, their persona, they have a better chance to get reelected.
Let me quickly talk.
I got one number for you, 26 consecutive years he's held elective office. That means there's a lot of oppo, a lot of votes, a lot of everything.
Yeah, right.
Texas is to Republicans what California is to the Democrats, the largest reliable source of cash and electoral votes. In 6 of the last 8 elections, there's been a Texan on the Republican ticket. 17 of the last 48 years, there's been a Texan president. So this is not unusual.
And the question on the Texas front, I mean, all those Texas pioneers, the Rangers, all the bundlers of all the big cash, they've been holding back. They've been on the sidelines. Now the question is, are they going to go to Bachmann? They're not going to Romney for the most part. Are they going to go to Bachmann, or are they going to go to Perry? In Florida and Texas, there's an enormous amount of electoral votes and an enormous amount of money.
I want to talk about Rick Perry. He announced his candidacy for president yesterday in South Carolina. Here's a little clip of that.
will create the jobs and the progress that's going to be needed to get America working again. And I'll promise you this. I'll work every day to try to make Washington, D.C. as inconsequential in your life as I can.
George, you were there. What'd you think?
He was talking wisely to redstate.com, a website, conservative bloggers. He can fire up the Republican base the way Michelle Bachmann can and the way we as yet have no evidence that Mitt Romney can. It's very hard to win a nomination in this country if you can't fire up the base. You can't win the White House just with the base, but you can't win the nomination without it. And he's really good at that.
You followed his career in Texas for probably longer than you want to admit. What do you think?
25 years. I took his filing when he was a Democrat, ran as a Democrat at the Texas Democratic Party. This guy is an incredible campaigner. And for me, having watched George Bush and having worked for George Bush and having known Rick Perry, he is actually a better campaigner at this point than George Bush was. Now, part of his problem is he sounds a lot like George Bush. He looks like a president, though, if you look at the picture, but he sounds and has similar mannerisms to George Bush. I don't think that's as much of a problem in the Republican primary. It could be a problem in the general election. But don't underestimate this guy. This guy took apart an incumbent Republican U.S. Senator who had an 85% approval rating and beat her by 20 points in the primary by being Tea Party before Tea Party became cool.
Laura, your thoughts on Perry?
Yeah, I've interviewed him a bunch of times, and what's significant to me is that the Obama War Room is primarily focusing on two people. It's Perry and it's Romney. Both of them. I mean, to Michelle Bachmann to some extent. Perry's the new threat. They're going through the Texas record. Is it really as wonderful as everyone says? Isn't it just based on a fossil fuel economy? So they're going to bring in the big oil stuff. Perry's people are coming back with, we are a healthcare state. I mean, anyone who's been to Houston, you know that big hospital complex. You know all the jobs created by that. For some reason, all these healthcare companies come to Texas and set up shop. It's an amazing story, but they're already poking holes in it. They see him as a big threat.